Are you ready? How many of you had more than 2 puddings? Oh, yes. How many did you actually have? 4. Ah. But you're tall. That's all right. Okay. So we're now going into a couple of case studies, and the first is about technology convergence in safety, and Ferran Sanz is going to introduce that to us. Ferran, just briefly tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, first of all, let me introduce myself. I am Ferran Sanz. I am professor at the Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona, Spain, and where I am the director of a research program of Biomedical Informatics, and I am also involved as coordinator in eTox, academic coordinator in eTox and eTransafe IMI project, and also as partner in the TransQST project. These 3 IMI projects are in the area of safety, toxicology and safety, so I know a little about this area in which we are going to talk a little. So I guess that all of you will agree with me if I say, as in this paper, that the pharmaceutical industry remains under huge pressure to address the high attrition rates in drug development. If we go to a little more in detail, we will see, for instance, that several years ago, still 40% of the termination of drug R&D projects were still because of problems in the non-clinical or preclinical toxicology. And even more, if we look only at more recent figures, the phase 2 and phase 3 failures of projects that are late failures and consequently expensive failures, we still have a 24% of these failures that are due to safety issues. So, in consequence, it is very important for the development of new drugs in this framework of IMI to advance in the drug safety prediction as early as possible, as reliable as possible. There are different technologies, because this is the topic of today, that can contribute to this, and both have appeared in other presentations. On one side, we have the omics technologies that can contribute a lot. On the other side, we have integrative strategies that can be at the level of technologies, at the level of data, at the level of models. Just examples. When we talk about omics technologies, we are talking obviously about genomics, but not only genomics, transcriptomics, metabolomics, proteomics. All the omics can contribute a lot in this respect. When we talk about integrative strategies, for instance, if we talk about integrative technologies, for instance, organs on a chip can be an example of how integrative strategies can support drug safety prediction. But if we talk about the models, the in silico models, we can talk about multi-component and multi-scale models that can imply better and more accurate prediction of the drug safety. And last but not least, if we talk about integrative strategies regarding data, obviously we have the biomedical big data that is a fantastic material for making better predictions of drug safety. Let me just finish giving you a flash on these projects, on 2 of these projects, eTox and eTransafe, in which I am involved. The eTox project was an IMI project that finished by the end of 2017. That was a project about legacy data sharing from the pharmaceutical companies to improve the drug safety assessment. These were the companies and the organizations that were involved in this project. And the background of this project, the initial idea of this project, that it was an opportunity for better drug safety predictions if we were able to jointly exploit the wealth of high-quality toxicological data that was buried in the archives of the pharmaceutical companies. This is easy to say, but was difficult to do. But at the end of the day, we were rather proud of the results of this project because we were able to put together data from the 13 pharmaceutical companies participating, data about almost 2,000 different drugs or drug-like compounds, that for these drugs we collected more than 8,000 complex studies, complex toxicological studies of these compounds, and this implied that we collected almost 9 million of preclinical data points for these compounds. This is a fantastic and unprecedented amount of data that is there for making better safety predictions. The e-tox finished, and now we are in a new project, even more ambitious, called eTranssafe. eTranssafe, again, wants to work on the basis of legacy data sharing among the pharmaceutical companies, but not only preclinical data, also clinical data about clinical trials, and on the basis of this, to make better predictions, not only predictions at the preclinical level, but also at the translational level. So the one idea that is there is to collect the data not manually, more or less manually, as it was done in e-tox, but just taking advantage of a standard, and I insist in the word standard, to make more possible this data sharing that is SAND. SAND is a standard that is being implemented in the pharmaceutical companies for the preclinical data. And this gives, I say, an important opportunity for safety prediction. These are the organizations that are included in this consortium and that are making possible this effort in data sharing, in making this big data around safety possible for better predictions.
Thank you very much, Ferran. And do come and sit down. And can we have the other members of our panel? That's Salah-Dine Chibout, Joore, Philippe Detilleux, and Martin FitzGerald. So let's introduce you all. Let's start at the far end there. Tell us who you are and why you're here on this panel.
My name is Martin FitzGerald. I'm the Deputy Director General of the European Healthcare Distribution Association. When I mention that to some people, I get a lot of confusion in their eyes, but essentially representing the central element of the supply chain. So we purchase pharmaceutical products from manufacturers, we keep them in stock in our warehouse distribution centers, and we supply them to retail pharmacies, hospitals, and other healthcare professionals on a daily basis. So typically our members will be the backbone of retail pharmacies in Europe. They are supplying the full range of products that a pharmacy will need almost on an hourly basis into their retail outlets so that they can dispense them to patients.
And for your industry, where's the disruptive technology that will...
Well, we see there are two areas where we're seeing some disruption from a technological perspective at the moment. One is in relation to the finished product itself, as we see medicines verification systems being established, and the link between verifying the outer packaging of the product with centralized databases and how we can apply that in our businesses on a daily basis.
Is that the Falsified Medicines Directive?
That's the Falsified Medicines Directive. So that's one thing. Our members are also owners and operators of retail pharmacies. So in addition to visiting independent retail pharmacy, community pharmacy on a daily basis, they also own and operate their own pharmacies. So of course medication management systems is important for them and how they can support independent pharmacy and their own pharmacies with issues around this. So we see there is some technology which can support that, is potentially disruptive, and that's where our area of interest lies in this forum.
Okay, Philippe Detilleux.
Yes, I'm Philippe Detilleux. I'm the global head for preclinical safety at Sanofi. Sanofi is an active participant of IMI and actually is eTranssafe, e-tox. We contributed thousands of reports to e-tox. That's one reason for me to be here, but the other reason is that I'm currently the chair of the Translational Safety Strategic Governance Group within the FPA, And so we have been launching eTransSafe and several TransQST that was already mentioned, and then other, even in the clinical area, believe that safety is an area where we should, that's pre-competitive and where we gain by sharing data together.
And Philippe, we've been talking a bit about levers that IMI can use. We talked about funding. Is ability, for instance, could IMI decide that it's only going to give funds to have people who have deposited legacy data in that tox data?
Actually, the way we work, we first, agree as a company to share data. Now, of course, there are bigger companies that can, like I said, we share thousands. There are smaller companies that have fewer compounds contribute. I think everyone is welcome. The more we have, the more we cover also the diversity. Because you have to realize most companies tend to work in the same chemical space. And so to improve our predictive tools, we need to actually explore the broader chemical space. And we can only do that by sharing information from companies.
Should it be mandated? In other words, as a company, should you only be able to benefit from IMI funding if you have contributed data to that legacy?
I mean, I think companies coming to IMI are ready to share data, and they will do that, yes. And yes, I mean, this is the essence of what we do. So I think, sharing data is I think there are companies that maybe do not want to, and they are not in IMI.
Okay, Jos.
My name is Joore. I'm CEO and co-founder of Mimetas. Mimetas is in the organ-on-a-chip space. So we started 6 years ago with a platform. Basically, for the people that don't know, organ-on-a-chip is creating micro tissues, preferably on a compatible platform. In our case, it's a 384 well plate with microfluidics associated with it. And these micro tissues can be healthy or diseased and can be used for tox predictions, but also for efficacy studies by introducing specific disease characteristics. So currently we're working with about 50% of the top 50 pharma, including actually Sanofi and many others. And we're leading the pack there. The reason that I'm here is that we started off in the tox field. That was our first working area. But honestly, we are now moving both upwards the pharma chain, so towards screening and earlier detection of both efficacy as well as tox-associated problems, as well as downstream towards the patients, because if you can make a model of a disease, you can also make the model of the disease of an individual patient and use it for therapy selection.
Now, is this different from organoids? Or is it the same thing as organoids?
We use organoids. We see organoids as probably one of the best contents you can have for building tissue models. That also includes, by the way, iPSC technology, so induced pluripotent stem cells. So stem cell technologies in general are very close to what we are and are great tools to build tissue models. So it's different, but in many aspects it's also the same. We use organoids in our models.
Yes, good afternoon. I have still a little bit of my voice left. I hope you can hear me. I'm Salah-Dine Chibout. I'm from Novartis. I have multiple roles at Novartis, and one of them is in the safety, and that's why I'm here with you this afternoon. I am about 25 years in the industry, and I'm also a member of the IMI governing board, so I was part of the build-up of the IMI from a long term. And again, why am I here today? Safety is probably the area where we had the maximum impact from IMI. And I think it's fair to say with my colleagues who are in the industry for a long time that we could say that for the last decades, toxicology of safety has not evolved. We were doing the same things, we were bringing compounds to a certain stage and we were stopping compounds because they were toxic. Or we were discovering the toxicity later. A lot of investment for failure. And the reason why we didn't progress is because we did not want to share our failures. And it took a long time, it took to IMI to be created, and that was among one of the first, Detox was one of the first projects to be initiated with IMI, where we started to see 13 or 14 companies being interested to share. And we have created what we call a strategy governing group, which is called Translational Safety, led by Philippe here, around safety. We have all the other SGGs or strategy governing groups around diseases. The only non-disease one is around safety, because we believe that there's an area where we should really think about pre-competitive, and this is safety. We cannot play with it. So what we have seen is a tremendous innovation and learning, and we see the impact now in our pipeline, but we have so much still to do. It's a long journey, but this is really an area where we are going to be much more effective in developing drugs.
And presumably it also means, I mean, you say that you're anxious, you know, people didn't want to share their failures, but just because you failed with a drug in, let's say, respiratory, doesn't mean that actually that drug could be successful in a completely different field.
Yep. Safety is, of course, it's always a benefit risk that you have to look at. If a drug is not amenable to be developed in respiratory, maybe if it works in oncology, it could, for example. But still, the safety issue is still there. So we need to understand it, we need to study it, and then you can really define what the benefit risk is.
Okay.
And that's what the kind of work that has been developed with IMI is helping us to do.
Okay, so let's start with you, Ferran. How can we move forward from here? What should we be doing next? And how can you use what you're doing at the moment to identify paths that could be could become cool topics in the future?
There are different aspects in which we can move forward. For instance, in Eat and Safe, we have seen after our experience in e-tox that it's important to create guidelines for data sharing on the basis of our experience that can be used in other areas of drug R&D. Another aspect, for instance, that is needed is a greater involvement of the regulators on all this, because if we create new approaches, new technologies for drug safety assessment, but these new technologies are not accepted by the regulators, we'll have a problem to evolve and to be implemented. In this respect, for instance, in the field that I know the most, that is the in silico models, it's important that we are able to create a clear and precise documentation of the models in order to make them reproducible. Also, the validation of the models, all these aspects are very important. So I think these are just examples of the things that we can do to advance, and obviously these conversions of technologies is very important. So we have to be able to put together people from different disciplines working on this, computer scientists, biotechnologists, toxicologists, of course, preclinical and clinical people as expert in drug safety, that sometimes they don't work together as much as possible, and so on. Even creating a common culture among these different disciplines for working on this. I remember an example when we started with e-tox, we had for sometimes a confusion regarding API. For the computer scientists, API was an application programming interface. And for the toxicologists, this was an active pharmaceutical ingredient. So, and we were working about API both. So, and what is this guy talking about, API? What is API here? And it was because we were talking about the different things. So, and it was necessary to make some kind of joint education about the vocabulary we use it and so on.
Yes, I got into terrible trouble because I thought somebody was talking about a prostate-specific antigen, PSA, and he was actually talking about a public service agreement, which nearly got me into a lot of trouble. Actually, now Corinne is still over there. So can we just give a microphone to Corinne? Corinne, just tell us as a regulator, just respond to what Ferran has just said.
You caught me completely off guard there.
In regards to toxicology, because your point was, Ferran, about that regulators have to be on board.
Absolutely. And in fact, we are invited them.
Well, and to us the door is open, and it's what I've been saying earlier, that we'd like the dialogue earlier. We really welcome what Salah-Dine has been saying as well about sharing data and how that really creates synergy. I think there's much more of that possible, and I was thinking I should have referred to the IMI project that will be hopefully be funded on pregnancy, and I think a lot more data sharing
Conception.
Yeah, I know it's called conception. It just hasn't been, I don't think the grant agreement has been signed. But so there, in terms of toxicology, there you're talking about reproductive toxicology, where I think a lot more data sharing it might be possible, and we as regulators don't even see it. And maybe we don't need to see it, but you know, in terms of the learnings that can be had from toxicity understanding, that should actually feed into a lot more of the medicines development. You know, we welcome that, and we would like to be involved in the dialogue so that we can make sure that we are not delaying innovation coming to patients, but we have an understanding very early on of what you're going through in the development process. And there are opportunities in place in terms of innovation task force discussion, European Innovation Network discussion, scientific advice, and so on, but that's all very regulatory bureaucratic speak. But certainly the door is open, and we...
And what do you do when you get something like that's a repurposed drug? Because something like thalidomide, which of course highly toxic in pregnancy, but now being used as a very successful treatment for, I think is it leprosy it's being used for?
Multiple
Somebody
myeloma.
Multiple myeloma.
So having learned from the thalidomide example, we just want to make sure that no pregnancies occur, and there's Celgene have put a quite effective pregnancy prevention program in place. That is one example of repurposing. I think there can be a lot more repurposing. We'd like to see more of it. And actually, whether that's commercially interesting and therefore will be something that's taken up by companies, we have, you know, perhaps not. So we maybe need to think about different incentives. What we as agency have as incentives is we will offer a reduced scientific advice to small to medium enterprises. Our executive director has the capacity to waive the cost for scientific advice for the benefit of public health. So if academia is doing repurposing studies and wants to come to us to say, okay, well, what is required? Again, the door is wide open. We, of course, need to be better at making that known and at entering into dialogue, but we're trying. Repurposing is one of the things where we believe the cost can be actually relatively low, and who knows what innovation could be.
Okay. Salah-Dine, for you, what are the things that we should be doing to move forward in this field?
Just, excuse me, one example with the regulators that, to help Corinne, we had a project called Safety, where we had the scientific advice, you know, with the agency, not only the European, by the way, but also the American, the FDA, where we have the approval or acceptance, have letter of support for new biomarker safety, liver, kidney, and cardiovascular markers. It would take a decade or two to have those markers being accepted if you would go for the normal process. That was an accelerator through that project. So that's one example. Now, your question is what do we need to do, what's coming forward? There are plenty of things, and my colleagues will talk about. My favorite is in the digital space that is coming now, and how safety is going to be connected to digital space. And so we are excited to think about how we're going to digitize the histopathology. Basically, the pathologists are looking at a microscope and zooming in a biopsy, and this is a 2D approach. So if you digitize that slide, you see much more. You have much more information. Actually, it's much more rich, and you can connect to what was discussed this morning with the Illumina presentation. You could connect the information to the molecular element. So for clinical, for biopsies or for skin biopsy or tumor biopsy, you would be able to have much more rich information that you can connect across the different computers with patients who have had the same kind of diagnosis, much more rich, and what kind of treatment has happened. So basically, you somehow open it to the world to do the diagnosis, not just having one physician who's going to do the diagnosis with his own knowledge. This is really exciting. We are going to think about a project like this one, and for toxicology, and Philippe could talk about it, but also for clinical. So digitization of histopathology is going to be a big one for the future.
And how about digitization in terms of patient surveillance of drugs in post-marketing? Because post-marketing surveillance has never been terribly effective, but actually it's very important in terms of safety.
Well, I think there's something called pharmacovigilance, and I think this is probably the area that has used the most advanced tools, computational tools for detection of signals. This, of course, digitization is going to help to do more, but I think this is a pretty effective one, and it's improving as we speak. Usually, and when we've talked about the conception program and we had the first contact with the academics, a lot of people are not aware about the pharmacovigilance activities that the industry is doing, as established by the regulators. So this is there, and we are using the latest technologies, using any kind of database that could accelerate any detection of a signal somewhere in Europe or even in the world now.
Okay, Jos, how should we move forward in your view?
In this specific field, we and actually our customers and partners also struggle with the concept of validation. So in a field where often the models are not completely fit for purpose, a lot of animal models are not very predictive, but they're the best they are. We get weird questions. We get asked, well, can you make something that looks like a rat? And I would say, okay, is the rat very predictive? Well, it's not. Okay, why should we do it? Well, to bridge what we have to what you have. And that's getting really complex, because then you're making models to actually validate models which we all agree on are not very good. So IMI could very much help to take this into the future, to look at it prospectively, because I think the only way we can make a change here is not by throwing away what we have and stop doing it and doing something else, which is also risk associated with it, but accept there's a period where we do things in parallel. And that takes time and effort and money, of course, to be able to do that. But that's, in my opinion, the only way we can actually phase out the ones that we don't like that much and phase in the ones that we do like while doing them parallel. And I like that concept very much, so maybe IMI can do something in that area.
So if you had an IMI magic wand, what would its next call be?
Well, I would say, let's huddle up, join in a program which might not sound too exciting, but to actually take compounds along the development route and add in new assays, organ-on-a-chip assays, the in silico analysis, take them all along without throwing away what you have, and start looking back as soon as you get to a result. And that could be a project that might take actually a long time to get there. Might take a decade or even 2 decades, but that's probably the only way we can make baby steps towards introducing better models in this chain.
Okay, so I'm now passing the magic wand baton to you, Philippe. What would you like to see IMI do to further this agenda?
So I will continue. I think I fully agree with what Salah-Dine said about AI, so I will not focus on that, although we can also use AI for improving our in silico systems, and not only, so AI, I think, will play a big role. Maybe I go back to the MPS example and the regulatory question. You have to realize that in the area of safety, we are in a highly regulated world, and any signal we come out from a safety perspective has to be used and analyzed. So it's not the same situation as you say, I have a biomarker for efficacy, I'm going to use it to decide if I go or not on my clinical trial. If the biomarker is wrong, you stop the trial, that's your problem. But if it's a safety signal, you have to take it into account. So it's very important, in order to get regulatory acceptance, that we validate in a large scale all those systems. There are many companies that are offering microphysiological systems, and no single pharma company by itself can really cover, validate a system to be useful and to get where we all want, which is replace animal studies. And so it's only by doing it together, and that will require a major investment, and as you say, it's not very sexy, but it will have to do it to bring all those systems and try to show until we have all confident that yes, this can replace the more classical, the one we have used for the last 20 years, which is not very good, we all agree, but that's all we have. And so I think what I'm trying to get at is that so there is still a lot of work in there, and like for biomarkers, like for many things, we need the the mass of data sharing in order to make it eventually a regulatory acceptable predictive assay.
And actually, this is something we were talking earlier about IMI perhaps not shouting about its achievements, but that's something that's incredibly well understood and popular with the public, is replacing animal models. It's something that they want to see done.
But actually, a lot of IMI projects, in the end, do lead to replacing animal. I will take just a small example because, for example, now for genetic toxicology, okay, it's a very specific field, so in silico systems are accepted, and we can make decisions based on in silico data. The next step will be to make it on broader models that we are developing with eTranssafe. And again, this is in replacement of studies, including animal studies.
So, Martin, for you, you know, if you like the final mile in safety, if I could call it that, anything that you would like to see to move this agenda forward? I mean, we've been talking a lot about needs and, you know, being driven by needs rather than, you know, what we'd like to impose. What do you and all your membership need?
Well, I mean, I will look at things from a post-marketing perspective, and if I take it from a medication management angle, we have an awful lot of services which our members are working with industry and with retail pharmacies to support the professionals discharging their duties in relation to medication management. And we can see that there is technology available there are the processes available there. One of the challenges that we have is bringing together the stakeholders to prove the concept, to prove the value of those processes and services.
What kind of services are you thinking of? Just give us a couple of examples.
Patient compliance, adherence services, making sure that the patient maintains their medication treatment, monitoring the outcome of the treatment, the value that is delivering to the healthcare system. And that can generate a cost saving to healthcare systems. Where we have difficulties is proving the value of those services, of that collaboration to healthcare systems, so that they can reward those with the right reimbursement models and also provide the right incentives that you can upscale all of these services. One of our problems is, of course, in Europe is that this type of activity is limited to national borders, and so we cannot get that pan-European perspective of these type of services which can deliver that value. So in the future, we would like to see greater collaboration between the stakeholders, which reaches out then to payers to show that value so that you get the right incentives back into the supply chain for the growth of those.
Okay, so I'm now going to pass my IMI magic wand, which I've stolen from Pierre, and say to you, is there anything that you would like to see developed as a call in this safety area with emerging and converging technologies? Now, they're remarkably quiet. Corinne, is there anything you would like? So Corinne has a list as long as your arm. So, okay, let's give her back the microphone.
So I will reiterate my request for data sharing of reproductive toxicity data, non-clinical space. I think the current IMI call conception is great. And there needs to be another one that addresses that. I think that is a hugely underserved area still in medicine safety. So if I have one favorite item, I'm afraid that's it.
Okay. Any last thoughts, gentlemen, before we close our panel?
Yeah, just one comment. What we have learned from the IMI since the eTalks was the first of this project is how the industry could share. And one of the most important elements from an industry or asset is the structure of the molecule, okay? So it's very difficult to share that because that's our asset. So I think what the team in eTalks have found is to create a neutral broker where all those molecules could be shared, but no one could see them, okay? Only some scientists, who would be able to mine the data and extract the best out of it. This is interesting because that is now the model for other IMI projects where we could share without disclosing our assets. So this is something important. We are living in a competitive environment, so you can do pre-competitive work and maintain your assets. So this is something that was a good learning.
Ferran.
Yeah, no, I have also a common, this morning also appeared the word interoperability. When we are talking about data sharing, putting data together from different sources, it's important to make this data compatible. And for this, for instance, in eTox, we had to make an effort for creating an histopathology ontology because we were surprised that each company used a different vocabulary to describe the histopathological findings, and we had to create this common vocabulary to make all the information compatible one to the other. And this is a point that when we talk about big data, when we talk about data integration, is very important to how the data is made compatible for being integrated.
And have you published your Ferran vocabulary book?
Yeah, no, this has been published. Yes, this is one result of eTox that is completely public. So everybody can reuse this ontology, and this is very, very important.
Okay, yes.
Maybe it might not be fully on topic in this session, but I just want to get back to the 4 fingers on the administrative burden on innovation. And I was actually shocked that there was just 4 fingers, because, you know, guys, this is innovative medicines, right? It's not the next Me Too medicine. It's not just a little bit better medicine. It's innovative, which means that you're gonna have to take a risk here. You're gonna have to do something that's out of the ordinary, and I think a lot of people are doing that actually. And the only way to make that happen is to fund a lot, be prepared. It's gonna fail a lot because that's inherent to innovation, but make sure that the ones that are successful stay here, thrive, and make sure that everybody knows about it. And that's the only way we can make this, we can bring this to the future. And I think the administrative burden on innovation should be as thin as possible. So stay out of it until it gets something really serious and regulated, and then you can go ahead.
So fail fast, and then provide as much support as you can to the winners that come through that hurdle.
Absolutely, and also make sure that everybody knows about the winners. We just discussed this over lunch. That's the most important thing, I think. At the end of the road, there's going to be a couple of winners. It can be only 10%, but shout it out. Make sure that everybody that actually pays to these programs knows there's big successes.
Okay, very good note on which to end. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.